Welcome back everyone. Today I wanted to take a look at Day of Infamy, because this is a game which, as I've stated in the previous video, is in my opinion one of the most underrated games out there. There aren't too many other games out there at the moment that are quite like Day of Infamy, being that it's a realistic World War II shooter but on a smaller scale, and it's a game which I find extremely fun. And that being said, when I was on the other day, during prime time, there were only about 180 people playing, and when you take into consideration the content that you get with Day of Infamy, that's way too low considering how good the game is. So let's firstly cover what is so good about Day of Infamy, and primarily, in my opinion, it's the gunplay. It's really fun using the guns, especially the rifles. Extremely meaty, they feel powerful and they feel great to use. And this is where the World War II aspect comes into significance, because all the guns have the standard iron sights except for the sniper rifles, and that's something you don't find in too many games, only the really realistic shooters. And I don't know, there's something I just find enjoyable about that. You don't have a variation in 2x, 4x, 6x scopes, except for the snipers, and for me that just places everyone on the same kind of level playing field, and it just provides a different type of gameplay that you don't find too often. And when you combine the incredible gunplay with the maps, which look incredible and also play really well for the most part, and are based on iconic important World War II sites, and the most popular game mode, Invasion, does complement the map design really well. So with just the gunplay and the map design, just with those two things, you've got the basis for a really good game. And you can add on top of that the sounds, which sound really realistic, sound like you're in a battle, and also the impressive music that this game's got. I guarantee in the browse server menu, you're going to be getting yourself pumped up to play some games. So what is it then? What is it that's stopping this game from really excelling, and why has it got such a low player count if it is such a good game? Well, the developers who went on to make Insurgency Sandstorm have unfortunately neglected the game and abandoned it somewhat, at a point where, in my opinion, it could really do with a few extra tweaks just to push it over the edge and make it that perfect realistic shooter that fits into a genre almost by itself, considering I can't think of many other realistic World War II shooters on a smaller scale. This game is really good when it's working well, but there are things that can be so annoying and they can happen over and over again that it outweighs the amount of fun you're having each time you play the game. So for example, a general area which I think causes a lot of problems when playing this game is related around explosives. Now I don't mean all explosives, I think some things they get right, things like grenades. I think I'm pretty happy with where grenades are at the moment, and it's not just the explosive factor, it's more how you can use certain things. I've seen in the comments of some of the previous videos I've done on this game of people saying they liked it but ultimately got a bit fed up of things like dying at spawn due to someone firing a bazooka halfway across the map. And that is a real problem in this game. I know it sounds like a small thing, but you've got to remember that you respawn in waves and there's about 30 seconds at least between each wave. And so if you're dying at spawn and the next time you spawn the same thing happens again, it doesn't take too many of those before you start to get pretty pissed off. And the game you were playing to have fun starts not to be all that fun anymore. So that's a negative aspect of the game, but it's by no means the only negative aspect. And I think it's something which comes about because of two things. One being that bazookas in general I think are too strong in this game, and also although the map design is generally good, there are places where you can see into the enemy spawn which cannot happen in any game, not least a game that's realistic and where the time to kill is so low. But when you combine the overpowered bazooka with a line of sight into the enemy spawn, it's a recipe for disaster. To be fair though, the Insurgency that came before this game did have a similar problem, in that you could get rocket launcher pretty much as soon as you spawn, and yet that game's able to maintain a pretty high player count, especially compared to Day of Infamy. So when you look at that evidence, you're not able to say that the bazooka to the spawn is the game breaker. So what else is there? Well, each side's got an officer, and each officer can call in a varying degree of artillery. Now in theory I do actually like this feature, I think it's a nice thing to have. Unfortunately I think this type of game it just does not work in. Or at least it doesn't work in it in its current state, because explosives do deal a lot of damage in this game. We've already covered the bazooka and how much damage that does, and then on top of that you've got artillery and bombing runs and grenades as well, and they're all fine in their own right, but when you consider that this is a game that's on a smaller scale in terms of map size, It's not something like Hell Let Loose where you've got a massive map, so an artillery strike in a section of that map doesn't make too big an impact, unless you just happen to be in that section at that point in time. When you bring down the scale and you've got a smaller map, all of a sudden that artillery and those bombing runs affect a larger portion of the map. And so when you've got those things happening and you throw in the bazookas and you throw in the grenades, in my opinion it becomes too much of an explosive fest and you find yourself getting blown up out of nowhere. Now this clearly doesn't happen all the time, because I do enjoy the game and I wouldn't enjoy the game if that happened all the time. But because, like I said, with the time it takes to respawn, things like that, and when it happens over and over again in a single round, it doesn't take too many times for that to happen, and you start to think, yeah, I don't fancy going back to that game. I'm not saying it's necessarily cut and dry. I'm not saying just take that out and you've all of a sudden got a really good game, because there is a purpose for a lot of this stuff. That's why I'm saying I like how much damage grenades do, because it can be extremely hard to dislodge a well defended position on a game where the time to kill is so low. If you've got a really nicely placed MG, you're going to have to get past it or get through it somehow, and these things like artillery strikes and bazookas do a good job of getting rid of those well defended positions, so you can actually push forward and it's not just a constant stalemate. So I can see why these elements are in the game, but they are just too powerful, and unfortunately with the developers gone and the game being somewhat abandoned, what could have been a fairly simple tweak has sadly never happened. I think smoke grenades and smoke in general in the game is done really well, so that can give you what you need to push forward and get to the relevant positions. And then grenades, I don't mind them being powerful because they can clear out houses, and it does require you to actually get to the house in order to use them. You can't just fire it halfway across the map. So I don't think you need the artillery to be as frequent as it is. I think it could do with a longer cooldown before you can call in the next bombing run. And bazookas, I think they could be toned down a bit as well. If you've got the smoke and you've got the powerful grenades, I don't think the bazookas need to be as strong as they are. Of course, you also don't want the enemy to have an easy line of sight into your spawn. That's a slightly trickier one, but maybe you could just change the restricted area so they're unable to get into a position where they can fire into your spawn, and make it more punishing if you do go into those restricted areas. There are some smaller things as well that I wouldn't mind seeing changed, like the radio spam that people love to use, and also the amount of votes that appear on the side of the screen that break your immersion. But the big one is the amount of times you die to something which you can do absolutely nothing about. I get that this is a realistic game, and that is probably the most realistic thing they could do. But you've got to strike a balance. It is a video game after all. You've got to strike a balance between that realism and making sure that the user has fun consistently with the game. And consistency is where this game struggles. One session you can have the best time, the next session you can just get killed by shitty things that you can't really do anything about. Now I have focused on a lot of negatives in this video because I feel like the game is not too far away from being almost perfect. But that shouldn't distract from the fact that I do really enjoy playing this game. I think it's a great game and I do think it's underrated, but I can see why people are choosing not to play it. And the frustrating things I've highlighted in this video happen to you. You do begin to get a bit fatigued with the game, and it can be easy for those negative things to stick out in your mind when you think about playing it again. But I really enjoy it. I've been having a lot of fun with it, and I want to end this video on a positive note because all in all, me personally, I have had a lot of fun with it. I do really like it even as it is. I think it just needs a little bit of tweaking, but even without those tweaks I still enjoy the game and it's great fun to go back to. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and maybe think about subscribing. Cheers guys, I'll see you in the next one.
Throwing grenade!